Buffing a character is one of the most fun things you can do in Elden Ring because it provides you with a ton of damage as well as some really great defense and a ton of other options here. So I'm going to go ahead and give you the full breakdown and buffing guide for how to understand buffs in Elden Ring. Elden Ring has a ton of amazing buffs you can use for your character on any given playthrough. They range from extra damage, talisman stats, weapon buffs, and much more, which we're going to cover in this video. Understanding how to stack your buffs and what to use when can be incredibly frustrating to deal with, which is where I come in. I'm going to go over each buff type, the rules in which to follow when stacking your buffs, as well as provide you with all the information you're going to need in order to maximize your damage, take a lot less damage, or just improve your overall quality of life in the lands between. So let's get started. Now, when I mention the word buff, you need to understand I'm talking about enhancing your character's stats through a few different means the game has to offer. Buffs are going to come from talismans, incantations, sorceries, weapons, as well as different items that you can craft or find in the lands between. The trick is knowing how they all work together. You see, there are really 5 different types of buffs you need to be made aware of in order to put together a successful and powerful build in Elden Ring. The 5 types of buffs are weapon, body, aura, regen or regeneration, and special buffs. Now, as far as the rules you need to follow when buffing so they don't cancel each other out, you need to make sure that there's only one buff of each buff class on you at one time. These special buffs are exempt here, as you can stack as many of those on you as you want without any cancellation. An example of this would be drinking your Flask of Wondrous Physic, which is a special buff, and then using Uplifting Aromatic, then a Pickled Turtleneck for more stamina. Because all of these are special buffs or unique buffs, you can stack as many of them on you as you want. Now, I want to make a note here that technically you still are getting buffs from different talisman in Elden Ring, but those work the same as special buffs and can be stacked with any other buff type with no penalty or cancellation of stat, damage increase, or defense increase on your character. You also can look up underneath your health bar and tell where your buffs are coming from if they are coming from talismans. Your talisman buffs are going to be square, and any other buff that you put onto your character is going to appear as a diamond. This is a very easy way to keep your buffs in order and know exactly where each buff is coming from to make sifting through and understanding your buffs just a little bit easier. So as far as what each buff type is going to do, it's actually pretty simple. Body buffs are going to affect only you and your body. Aura buffs are going to affect you and your allies or an area where the buff will cover. Weapon buffs are going to affect just your weapon, so greases, certain ashes of war, and spells all fall into this category. We have also already briefly discussed special or unique buffs, and finally we have item buffs that come from things like boiled crab, exalted flesh, and so on. All of these make up the 5 buff types, and all can be stacked and mismatched to make something extremely powerful. I do want to give a disclaimer here because so far things seem pretty simple and easy to understand. There are exceptions to the rule and some really weird buffs that stack, and we will get into that in just a moment, but I just wanted to make you aware that the rules can and sometimes should be broken in order to get you where you need to go in your build. One example that comes to mind is the fact that you can use 2 special buffs, the Opaline Bubble Tear and the Uplifting Aromatic. The Uplifting Aromatic will have a 10% damage buff on it, but you can swap that 10% out with the Commander's Standard for a 20% damage boost, which will override the 10% damage boost of the Uplifting Aromatic, but keep the bubble that gives you the damage negation, which is also going to stack with the Opaline Bubble Tear. Or how when using Braggart's Roar, which is a weapon buff, you can only stack the stamina, regeneration, or defense portion of the buff, but you cannot stack the extra damage on the weapon buff. The reason being is because the damage buff is applied directly to the weapon, as the stamina and defense is applied directly to you. There are little things here and there that you will find that are outliers within buffing your character, but the majority of buffs follow the same principles we have talked about so far, that is, you cannot stack buffs in the same buff category, and you can only stack one buff per category unless you're looking at weapon buffs, in which case you can have 2 max as you have 2 weapons, or special buffs, in which case you can stack as many as you would like. I'm now going to show you a brief segment of the video on how I stack buffs for this particular build I'm running here. I'm going to start out by casting Golden Vow, which is an aura buff. I'm then going to cast Howl of Shabriri, which is a body buff. Once I proc my Madness, the Age 1's Exaltation Talisman is going to proc. Then I'm going to go ahead and drink my Flask of Wondrous Physic. I will then hit Seppuku on my weapon, as that's going to then proc my White Mask and my Lord of Blood's Exaltation. both are going to be special buffs. Then I take out my Naga Kiba using Unsheath, and that's also going to proc Rolana's Cameo, which is a special buff that comes from a talisman. But guys, that should be a crash course in buffing within Elden Ring. I hope I explained it with a clarity and detail that everyone was able to understand. If there's any outlying buffs that stack together that you think are really cool and don't think a lot of people would know, go ahead and leave that down in the comments below. But I wanted to make this video just to give a little bit of clarity for those people who may want to start stacking buffs to get very powerful builds going. I know we've seen a lot of builds, and I have put out a lot of builds claiming to be overpowered or broken, and buff stacking is definitely the way to go in how to get those builds going. But guys, that's going to be it for this particular video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I definitely learned a lot as I was doing a ton of research to make sure that I wasn't messing up any of this information, and if there's a chance that I did, definitely correct me down in the comments below. If I did mess anything up, it definitely was not intentional, as I do want to provide you guys with some great information on this channel. So without further ado, thank you guys so much for being here. Make sure to subscribe, hit the bell notification on your way out, and until next time, stay safe, enjoy the game, and I'll see you in the next one.